On this episode of Podcraft, Jacob and I are continuing to work our way through a list of podcasting hot takes to see if we agree or disagree with them. Here's what's in store for you today. Authenticity is just lack of effort. You should stop worrying about trying to reach Gen Z. To be a good podcaster, you must listen to other podcasts. You should challenge your guests more. If you wouldn't listen back to your own episode, no one else will. Agreeing too much makes for a boring podcast. The definition of a podcast doesn't really matter. And the one we kick off with is nobody cares what mic you own.
Agree. No one cares. They care what you sound like, but they don't care what model it is. I think if you sound rubbish, they will care about that. I mean, definitely had that myself. Listening to a podcast is really good, but actually it's just a bit of a tough listen because the equipment's not good. Or actually more frequently you go quite far back in a catalogue of a podcast that's been running for a long time and they were recording on what sounded like toasters. Which is, that's actually kind of more acceptable because it was 11 years ago or whatever. But yeah, I don't think people care what mic you're on. They only care what you sound like. And there is, like, especially with video podcasts, there's a lot of, a lot of people feel like they have to have a fancy microphone to have on the camera. Do you know what I mean? They need to look like everyone else. They need to have the butt of their Shure microphone or whatever up on the feed. So yeah, no, I don't think people really care. That's totally a personal vanity thing. Like this microphone that I've got, it's not fancy. Sounds all right though. Does the job. Don't think anyone cares who makes it. But yeah, I don't sound like a toaster.
You've got the Boya K9, is it?
That's right, yeah.
And I've got the Samsung Q2U, the old classic. But yeah, I would agree with this statement. It's certainly, I don't know that there's any listener out there, unless audio's properly their thing, who's wondering what specific model of mic you've got. There are a couple of, I guess, angles to this discussion. So one of them is, if investing in a mic that you really like the look or sound of, if that helps you to really buy into your podcast and makes you feel like a more accomplished presenter, then I think that's worth caring about. That's worth paying attention to, for sure. But that's not the listener. That's you, isn't it, as the presenter?
Well, I guess, the statement is nobody cares. I guess you do care. So, you could sort of weave that one in there. But yeah, it's mostly going to be you that cares. Everyone else will just care about how good you sound.
Yeah.
Or better, like, actually more correctly, how shit you don't sound. They just don't want you to sound awful.
And I think that some video podcasts are causing real problems on this front because, these chat shows that we see now that are almost reimagined TV shows or aspiring TV shows that come under the banner of podcasting, and you see these setups. They're on the sofa in a room that's not conducive to good audio, and they've got these microphones, whatever microphones they are, but just sitting on like a table, like a coffee table, and it all looks very nice and casual, and the sound is just appalling. So if I wanted to listen to one of those shows, I would certainly care about the microphones, not because the microphones themselves are necessarily bad microphones. They're just entirely the wrong tool for the job in terrible conditions as well. So there's that whole thing too. Is a bugbear of mine.
Can I have a little moan about something? Something that really
I love moaning.
Annoys me about just content creator these days. And one of the things that they do, blatantly non-handheld microphones being handheld.
Yeah, like holding a lavalier mic.
Actually, I don't mind that one. See the little trope of like putting a lavalier mic on like a wooden spoon? I actually quite enjoy that. It's whimsical. But I'm talking about like a Shure, what is it, like MV9 or whatever? Something, is that right? Something that's meant, like, it's meant to be on an arm. It's meant to be on a stand. It's not meant to be handheld. There are great handheld mics out there. They're built for that. They have the form factor for it. But no, they're just holding like a stub of an arm in their hand, and it just looks, the center of gravity is all over the place. It looks uncomfortable. It distracts me from what you're saying. You shouldn't be doing it. Stop it.
Yeah, there's a lot of mics out there that you're right, they simply aren't designed to be handled. Not only are they very awkward to handle, but they're super sensitive to any handling noise as well. Like even a classic microphone that handles handling noise well, like the Q2U, the aforementioned Q2U, or something like the Shure SM58, you still will get some handling noise there, even though they're absolutely perfect for handling. So yeah, I wouldn't like to pick up like a Q9U or an MV7 Plus or something like that and try and record into that whilst holding it. That's just nuts. It's crazy. Stop
Absolutely
it.
crazy. I most lately saw it on Grace Campbell's podcast where she was interviewing her dad. It's Alistair Campbell's daughter. For
I
anyone
was
not
going
in
to
the
say, I've
UK,
no idea who that is.
Yeah, for anyone not in the UK, he was the sort of press officer for Tony Blair, the Prime Minister. Controversial figure, but quite a good podcaster, part of the Rest Is family now. But yeah, no, she was doing it, and it's like, I get it. It's like this thing that youngins seem to be doing, but stop it. Stick to lavalier mics on like household objects. That's endearing. Don't handhold an MV9, please.
All right, then give us another one, Jacob.
All right. Authenticity is just a lack of effort. I went and put one in that was quite similar, and I said you should care about the details. Good enough won't cut it. I think they're pretty similar. Do you agree with that, or you disagree with that?
Yeah, that is a very, very interesting one, isn't it? And I guess parts of it tie into what we've just talked about. Because I have to say agree or disagree, I'm going to disagree in the broadest sense here, but there's a lot to agree with there as well. I think authenticity, or so-called authenticity, from a pure laziness point of view, where you just don't tidy stuff up. We've talked about in the past door chaps and phone rings and stuff like that. There's also just not putting enough thought and planning into the content itself. It's not necessarily all about the audio quality. It's let's just have a chat and we'll see what comes up, and that's maybe that's authentic, but it's also, fair enough, have a chat with your pal, but don't expect anyone to sit and listen to it. Probably don't bother recording it either. So yeah, there's that angle as well, I guess. What's your thoughts?
I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. I think I agree in principle that authenticity is just a lack of effort, but that doesn't always mean that it doesn't play out, that it doesn't work out for you. Do you know what I mean? I think some people are so entertaining in their fully authentic self, or just not necessarily entertaining but engaging or whatever. I think some people can get away with it, but as a rule of thumb, it's not a good way to operate. Like, you have to be, I don't know, I think you really have to have some sort of like extensive career in doing something similar. Do you know what I mean? In order to kind of style that out as something workable. I think for a lot of people just starting out, authenticity probably is just a lack of effort to some degree. Not to say that everything needs to be super polished either. And like, it isn't all about, having every single second sort of tighten and scouring over and not leaving in any ums or ahs. That's not really what I mean at all. But I think just I don't know. I think it would be dishonest to say that you can just switch on a microphone and publish that and expect much to come of it, because there are so many new podcasts, so many existing podcasts. Like, it's competitive out there, and you need to compete, and you need some sort of edge. And there is a bar to quality now that's higher than it was 5 or 10 years ago. And you can just turn people off if you're not reaching it, no matter how good the actual content is. So yeah, I don't know. I think I agree, but like, not sort of wholeheartedly. Do you know what I mean? Like, there is nuance to it, but yeah, I would never think maybe a lot of advice is just do it and just get it out there. And I think that is fine for like actually getting started, getting over that initial hurdle of kind of not, going from 0 to 1, as it were. But yeah, I don't think that's actually good advice. I think it's kind of bad advice, really, for newer creators. I think once you've kind of gone far enough down that road and you know what you're doing, then I think that changes a bit. Like, authenticity can be achieved while also keeping that quality bar up. But I think, if you're just starting out, no, I think it could kind of send you down the wrong road of just being lazy and giving yourself an excuse to be lazy. I think that's kind of what I'm driving at here, is that, yeah, it can just be an excuse to not make the effort and call it authenticity. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I remember when I studied radio at college, and there was quite a few like breakfast time DJs and that were kind enough to come in and speak to us a lot of the time and invite us in to kind of see them work. And it was always shows that when you listen to them purely as a radio listener, they sounded very casual and spontaneous and off the cuff. They had this aura of the guy or girl's just rolled out of bed and got down there and is just casually playing some music, having a bit of chat and just figuring it out on the fly, and it all comes together nicely and neatly. All the texters and the competitions and that. And when you actually spoke to the people and saw them work, you realised that it didn't get to 9:30 in the morning and they went off to the pub, as I often imagined. It was, I'll go and get something to eat and get a coffee, and then I'm planning tomorrow's show for another 3-4 hours. And I come in the next day at 6 in the morning or whatever, and I know exactly what's happening. And as much as these, like I say, they sounded very spontaneous and casual, it was thoroughly planned. And I wouldn't say that was unauthentic. They were very authentically themselves, but they were also very polished and professional and prepared for what they were going to do.
It's a really good point. You can have authenticity in the delivery, but you're delivering something that is deeply prepared. You know exactly what you're going to be doing from beginning to end. You know what I mean? But like, you can deliver that authentically, in a way that is you, that does feel kind of casual and natural. But yeah, the amount of prep that you need to do for that, you're not just sitting down to do it and then going off to the pub, like you say. Yeah, I think that's...
I wish we were.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Was that mine or yours? I can't remember.
That was mine.
Okay. Here's one for you then. You should challenge your guests more. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I agree. Some of my favorite podcasts don't take an answer. Like, I was listening to one of my favorite interviewers is a guy called Pete Laha. He's the sort of head of marketing at Ahrefs, which is it's a marketing software company. But he gets guests on from big companies who are normally quite used to just coming in and I think just saying, here's something that we did. Here's another thing that we did, kind of look at how impressive these things are. But Pete slows this thing right down. They'll come out with some claim the guests in this last episode I listened to just started stringing off all of these things that they did to try and grow their company. One of them was, we advertised on the Sphere in Vegas, and we did a drone show, and she was ready to just go on to another 10 or 15 different things, and Pete went, no. Come right all the way back. We're going to talk for 20 minutes about how advertising on the on the Sphere was incredibly expensive and not that effective. And I've heard plenty of interviewers that would just kind of be led by the person that they're interviewing and are quite happy to just go from thing to thing to thing. I think you have to challenge your guests. You have to say, stop, we need to get deeper into this. And I can maybe tell that you want to skip past it, but you've said it, and this is my show. And I know what my listeners want, and they want detail. They want to know how you did it. They want to know how it worked out, how much it cost. I mean, he kept getting kind of fobbed off a little bit on questions, but he really wanted to know, how much did this thing cost? Because the people that are listening to this, they're listening to this podcast because they want ideas. They want to know, is this something that I could do for my business? They're not here just to listen to your successes or your sort of achievements and the headline of it. No, they want to know. They want the material. They want to learn from it. And yeah, so many marketing podcasts don't do that. There's so many sort of like CMO shows that'll just skip over details, and it just feels like you're reading a magazine front cover, and it's awful. I've unsubscribed to so many shows for doing that, and the small handful that I've got left are the ones that just don't take no for an answer. They will dig and dig and dig and dig, and like if you can't give them substance on what you're talking about, then don't bring it up. I love that. And yeah, so 100% agree. You should challenge your guests more. You're not there to necessarily be their friends. I don't know if that's controversial. Maybe they are your friend, but like for the purposes of your show, you're there to get value out of your guest for your listener. And I think kind of like full stop on that statement, really, for me. Yeah, it's not, you're not there to I don't know, different show to show, right? But for the most part, 100% would say that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with pretty much everything you've said there, and certainly the statement. If you bring guests onto your show, and again, there are always edge cases here. I know there are certain types of if you're running a grief podcast or something, somebody's talking about their own experiences, you're not there to like bully and challenge them. But if we think about, I'm bringing this guest on, ultimately they're selling something, but they're here to bring value to my audience first and foremost. You're not there to facilitate their TED talk, because like you're saying, they're going to come with pretty much a pre-rehearsed skit that they're going to give you. And if they're going on other shows, which they probably are, you just don't want to just replicate that same interview. You want to pick up on things like you're saying, well, you mentioned this, like stop there, like can we get into this? Like I think this is a really good angle. You're taking that conversation in a different direction that the listener's not going to get that on all these other shows where the guest is being given free rein just to deliver this pitch. So I think, in most types of interview show, this is a very overlooked strategy, is just really listening to your guest and being able to pick out things that, little side quests that are going to create real value where it was maybe a bit unexpected for the guest. You're not trying to ambush them, but they've brought something up, and it's your right then to ask them about it. Otherwise, if they don't want to talk about it, they shouldn't have said it. So
exactly, 100%. Yeah, get them told.
And stop holding that mic as well.
Good. Right, well, I'll do one.
Yep.
Have a shot. Right. I like this one. You should stop worrying about trying to reach Gen Z.
Yeah, I put this in today, and it's because I thoroughly agree with it. And again, if I'm creating, it goes without saying, if I'm creating the specifically for the Gen Z podcast, of course, this is nonsense. But again, if I think about this show, I believe, based on previous data and just interactions with listeners, we're a listenership that are certainly over 30, if not over 40 and 50. And it's the same with another show that I do, my tabletop show. It's very much an over 35s, over 40s audience. And when you hear all this stuff about, you must be doing this to reach Gen Z, you must be doing that. And I think, well, I don't need to reach Gen Z. Fair enough, if I get a handful of Gen Z listeners who are really interested in the topic and angle, that's brilliant, of course, welcome. But it's just not, they're not my target audience in the main because of the generational interests and stuff like that. So yeah, I think there's probably a lot of shows out there who are doing things to try and attract younger listeners when they really aren't their target audience anyway in the main. So I guess it's kind of permission to not worry too much about that. What's your own thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but as for the statement, it's a tricky one to answer. Like, I have to kind of hedge it because you kind of said this already. It depends on who your target audience is. If the vast majority of the people who are like, if you want to say eligible to listen to your show, eligible to enjoy it, are not Gen Z, then I would say don't worry about them at all. Like you say, some will find it, some will listen, welcome them. That's all great. But if your show, it can cast a wider net, then you probably should. Because, I mean, there's a million reasons. Not if for nothing else, the amount of content consumed by Gen Z is higher than most other generations. So if it's listenership and, you know, sort of following that you're looking for, then yeah, you kind of do need to worry about reaching them. But it really does depend on what your show is and who it is that you're targeting. I think there's probably more shows that should worry about targeting Gen Z than shouldn't. I think it's probably an exception. But I also don't think it's like, what do we mean by trying to reach Gen Z? I don't think that you should really change your content for it to reach Gen Z. I think that should, you know, your content should be what your content's going to be. Reaching Gen Z is more about distribution than it is anything else. It's the whole short form clips and different platforms sort of approach, and on those platforms, yeah, your content can take a sort of different form. Like the editing of that can be slightly different. It can be more stylized in a way that Gen Z is more likely to resonate with. The core of your content and how you record your podcast, I don't think that changes at all. So in that sense, I don't think there is anything to worry about in trying to reach Gen Z. If you have to reach them, you can, and it's a sort of separate activity rather than, kind of changing what your podcast is and how you do it and all these things. So I disagree with the statement, because I think that for a lot of people, they should try and reach Gen Z, but I don't think that you should worry about it either. It's just a job like anything else. It takes a slightly different approach. It's maybe not the default to how you work at the moment, but if Gen Z would appreciate what you're creating, then yes, you absolutely should go after them. Because pretty soon they're not going to be, the young, unemployed generation. They're already, I mean, what's Gen Z?
I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
If only I was sitting in front of a machine with the entire world's knowledge at its...
Christ. Oh, well, actually, Matthew, technically speaking, I am Gen Z.
Really?
I was born on the cusp. I was born in 1997. So
right.
I am actually, I identify as millennial. I do not identify as Gen Z. I have all the trappings of a millennial. So, pinch of salt. But theoretically, when we're talking about Gen Z, we're talking about someone that's 14 to 29 years old. That's people that are, getting into the workforce and actually part of the market. And if you're like, what is your podcast? Is it people? Is it are you? Is the end game you selling something? Is it yeah? It really depends on what it is. It's a very viable and large segment of listeners. So yeah, I think you should worry about it. Would you want me to listen to your podcast? That's what you got to ask
Gen Z,
yourself.
you young whippersnapper.
I know.
1997. So yeah. No, I honestly didn't know that, and I should have looked that up. I would have, I guess I would have said people under maybe 24 or that, if I had to have a stab at that. But yeah, aye. No, it's interesting. Good points. Yeah, I guess the bottom line here is it's a kind of Trojan horse way of saying, like, should your audio only show that you've been doing for 15 years suddenly start doing short form video on TikTok to get young people to hear it?
Yeah.
The answer, I still think no for most folks, unless they've had some weird pivot or that, or I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. Let's see. Here's one I like. In order to be a good podcaster, you need to be a podcast listener. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I agree. And I think that that's true for pretty much anything to do with creating content or creating just about anything. It's really difficult to create something that you can be confident is going to be received well if you don't have an intuitive understanding of what good looks like. And I don't think you can have an intuitive understanding of what good looks like without having sampled an awful lot of what's available already. Yeah. Kind of, yeah, I think that's how I'd feel about that. So what was the statement? Am I agreeing?
Yeah, so in order to be a good podcaster, you need to be a podcast listener first.
Yes, agree. Yeah, totally agree. What do you think?
I do agree, but and I've got my own thoughts on this, but the devil's advocate statement would be around, you might hear somebody saying, well, I don't want to hear what everyone else is doing. I want to do my own thing. So it's really like unique. What would you what do you think of that kind of statement?
Yeah, I think, one of the ways that you can get kind of really high quality creation is sort of knowing where the boundaries are and then knowing well enough where you can push them in order to be unique and be creative in these sorts of things. But kind of, not to be too wanky, but like the greatest artists know exactly where those boundaries are. Do you know what I mean? Like the artists that kind of go well outside the box, they know what the box is, and that's why they're successful. So I think you need to know what the box is in order to successfully go outside of it. I think that applies to pretty much everything that is sort of, creation, whether it's content or art or business or whatever it is. Yeah, I think you do need to have an idea of where those boundaries are. And it's easier. It looks easier than it actually is to kind of push outside of them successfully. They exist for a reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, to paraphrase what you've kind of said there, and I can't remember whose quote this is specifically, but you need to know the rules first before you could break them. And there's nothing wrong with breaking the rules and doing something totally different, as long as you know what you're doing and where everything is.
Yeah.
I think to think that you're going to come to podcasting without having really paid attention to any other podcast and you're going to do something magically unique and different is pure hubris. You wouldn't write novels if you'd never read a novel, or you would certainly not write a remotely decent one. And again, this applies to all the creative arts, I suppose. Like, yeah, you need to be listening. You need to get a taste for good content. In order to kind of hone your own, and over time, you obviously find your own voice, you find your own angle. But yeah, there are rules, and they're not rules that you can't break. You should know them first before you do so or try to.
Yeah, absolutely. Almost everything that we kind of create as humans, and it's like something that we do it, like that's kind of almost what we exist for, is creating things, whether it's people or it's art or it's ideas or, technology, all these different things. It's always an evolution, very infrequently do you actually have someone come up with something new in a completely sort of different area that has never been seen before. That almost never, ever, ever happens. Even the greatest innovations in our history, it's always sort of based on something that came before it. And same with art, there's always an inspiration. There's always something that it's come from. So I don't think it's a bad thing either to use those rules, use that sort of boundary that's kind of been created, because it's a safe space. You're going to be able to, your chances for actually succeeding are higher in that established base, and once you've kind of found your feet in there, then you can innovate and you can do different things. And it doesn't even need to be in that particular project. You can start a whole new project fresh from the beginning that is innovating in some way that you're doing, you've got a really interesting format or a really interesting approach to guests, but like the chances of you sort of launching into something for the first time and successfully innovating are pretty low. And like you say, it's hubris. Hubris can be fun though. Not saying don't try it. It's probably not going to work.
Yeah, not to labour the point, but if we look at like musicians, if you have read or heard any interview with any successful musician ever, and they talk about their childhood, it's always, I got this record, I played it to death, I loved this band, I loved that band, I went to this gig, I went to that gig. Have you ever heard a musician, a really successful musician, and they've been asked about, growing up, what was the kind of soundtracks around the house and that? I never really liked music growing up. I wasn't really into it. Like, you would never hear that because they wouldn't have got to where they were if they thought that. So
yeah, almost everything comes from inspiration, and inspiration is looking at things that have already been done. So yes, I would say you absolutely must be a podcast listener.
Cool. I think it's your one. Then I'll strike that off.
All right. If you wouldn't listen back to your own episode, no one else will. Agree or disagree?
Agree. Yeah, definitely agree with that. I think we should be listening back to our episodes. It's part of the post-production process, the editing process, which you should be doing. Even if it's very light touch, you should still be doing it. And yeah, I think if you don't have time, if you feel you don't have time to listen back, then it's again hubris. Let's make this the word of the week. Why do you think anyone else is going to find time to listen to it? And this could even be a listen back. And I do this myself. I don't really consume anyone else's show at fast speeds. I just don't really believe in it. But I'll fire through hours at double speed when I'm editing it, and I'll still hear it. And I think that's important. One thing I don't do as much of that I should, and I think every podcaster should, is picking an episode out from maybe 1 month, 2 months ago, because you're far enough away from the recording at that point to really pick out things that you could have done better, little learning moments. I always think myself, if I listen back to an interview that I did, I'll notice a couple of months later, I didn't really pick up on what the guest was saying. I had the opportunity to ask a really interesting follow-up question there, and I missed it because I was obviously too focused on what I was going to say next or what I was going to ask next. So there's a lot to learn from episodes from a few months ago, but I think certainly when you've just recorded something, even if you think it went absolutely fine, if you can't even be bothered to listen back to it at double speed, why should anyone else listen to it ultimately? So what's your own thoughts?
That's a very good point. I I have to listen to it on double speed. I've also done the same thing. I guess not every episode, because when I was running Creatorcraft with Colin, kind of took it in turns as to who was editing it. And when he was editing it, I didn't listen back to it, but I probably should. But I hate listening to myself. I really, really hate it. But it's a good thing too, especially when you're starting out. To be fair, when we started it, that was my first most consistent kind of podcast that I'd worked on. And I did listen back to every episode. And it helped a lot with just figuring out, some little things to work on that Colin wouldn't necessarily have told me. Do you know what I mean? I just picked up some things for myself that I thought I want to change this little behavior or change this thing or whatever. But yeah, I have to listen to it back on 2 times speed because I can dissociate a little bit from my own voice. It doesn't exactly sound like me, so I can listen to it. So I don't know. Yeah, I agree, but I don't think I'm alone in finding it awkward to listen back to yourself, but it is something that you have to do. Especially when you're trying to, improve yourself. I don't think you can improve yourself as a podcaster really without listening back to yourself. I think that's probably what I would take away from that.
Yeah. As a little side note there, you kind of talked about that, the sound of people's own voices and the kind of low-level horror that we experience when we first hear ourselves back. And, I had that myself when I started podcasting. Again, this is 15, 16 years ago now. And, when I started to hear myself back in recordings a lot, it's uncomfortable. Do you think, though, because I'm more than used to it, I'm completely numb to it now. Do you think in this day and age where people are more likely to be taking, we take a lot of videos around the house because we've got a 4-year-old, and it's, you're try to film wee bits and pieces. I think a lot of people are maybe more used to hearing themselves now because of little moments like that where they're filming stuff. So I'm wondering if, is that as big an issue for folks as it once was, the sound of your own voice? Because there was a period not that long ago where people literally never heard recordings of themselves. They just didn't. But now it's probably a bit more common because folks are taking videos here and there all day.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think that's probably true. And it's weird how kind of behaviors shift because, as far as I know, most of Gen Z can't stand making phone calls because it's
Yeah.
just not something they do. But they're, seemingly quite happy to be recorded on video and all these things. So yeah, I don't know. That's really bizarre, but it's a good point. I think probably people are much more used to it now than they used to be. Yeah, I wonder if there's any studies on that. There probably is.
All right. I had one I like to look of here, and it was agreeing too much makes for a boring podcast.
Agreeing to what? Just like, yeah, what?
I think this is around if we're, for example, doing what we're doing right now, if we were picking apart something in podcasting and we were both completely aligned on everything at all times, would that necessarily make the podcast boring?
Yeah, probably. Depends on the format, right? Like, if it's something like this, like I think we've had sort of kind of different opinions on things that we've talked about here, not on purpose, just that's the way it's worked out. I think that probably does make for better content because perspectives is something that's kind of hard to come by these days. You typically end up getting one perspective or the other. Everything's quite polarized in no matter where you are. Do you know what I mean? Down the lines of what social platform you use, down the lines of what podcast you listen to. So I think being too agreeable does make for a boring podcast. I think it makes things quite forgettable as well. I think tension and sort of dissonance is from a branding perspective as well. Just not even like beyond just like the quality of the content. From a branding perspective, it's quite important too. Because if you're just agreeing with all the same things as the sort of sea of your peers agree with, you don't stand out there at all. And that's not to say that you should agree, but people do this. Obviously, people do just disagree and argue for the sake of standing out. That's not what I'm advocating for. That's not good or helpful, and typically you can see right through it. But yeah, I don't know. I think if you're probably, I think if you find you're agreeing too much with whoever you're co-hosting with, then you probably need to like change up the topics a bit or something. I'm not sure. Yeah, I would say it gets quite samey. Like I second mention of Alistair Campbell for this episode, but I listened to The Rest is Politics an awful lot. And one of the things that made that podcast really interesting when it started was their trademark disagreeing agreeably. Like the hosts come from two completely different wings of politics, talking about things that generally would split people right down the middle. And that's what made it a really interesting show. You would never see someone from, it'd be like seeing high profile Democrats and Republicans hosting a podcast together. I think that probably does exist, and the equivalent does exist. But yeah, it's what made it really interesting, and you actually can feel in the episodes that they agree on things wholeheartedly. It's like, yes, it's still interesting because what they're talking about is interesting to me, but like the quality of the content isn't as good. I want them to disagree and I want them to dig into things more, because disagreement isn't always like a sort of ugly thing, right? It's like, it's where you find substance and nuance and yeah, an interesting third perspective that isn't just one polar opposite to the other. So yeah, no, I agree. Agreeing I disagree. I agree. I don't know. I
We've
agree.
tied ourselves in knots here because I don't even know now. So the statement itself is agreeing too much makes for a boring podcast. So you say you agree with that statement?
Well, yes, I do, but also at the same time, I disagree. No, I agree. I agree with the statement. Agreeing too much does make for a boring podcast.
Just to keep things interesting, I'll disagree with the statement itself. I have some other thoughts, but I reckon first and foremost, I don't necessarily think your chemistry lives or dies on tensions or differences of opinion. It could just be, there could be other forms of chemistry, humour or whatever. So I don't think it's necessarily fully true. With that said, there is such a power, and you've touched on this, like that kind of respectful tension between hosts. Like if, you mentioned, you got a Democrat and a Republican and they were able to have, and it, sometimes it might get heated, but at the end of the day, they're still going to turn up week after week and respect each other as humans. You could have, two, and I'm sure this exists, two rival football fans that support bitter rivals that were able to turn up week after week. A vegan and somebody who subscribes to Beefbox, call back to last week, they do a health show together and they're coming at it from they're not shouting at each other, but they're bringing different perspectives. They're not trying to change each other's mind. They're just making sure that their side of the, not even argument, just their perspective is heard. And they acknowledge that another perspective exists, and here it is sitting across the desk from them, and it's up to the listener to make up their own mind. That's a very adult way of doing things, maybe a way that doesn't exist as much as it maybe should in 2026, unfortunately. But yeah, I do like podcasts that are able to bring that to the table. I think you can tell when it's forced, absolutely. And you touched on this too, Jacob, but you do hear sometimes people try to defend a position or trying to go the other, and you know that they're kind of just faking it, and they're they're maybe going for a little. They think this will make a good short clip or whatever, and it's very, very forced. But yeah, if you can get those different angles, it can be a great USP for a show. Can be done well.
Yeah, just to say as well, I think you're spot on that other forms of chemistry are available. I wouldn't argue against that for sure.
MDMA.
Now there's an idea for the next episode. Yeah, no, for sure. Like there can be other chemistries, and I guess in that sense, not in every case, agreeing too much does make for a boring podcast, but there have been many a boring podcast where that has been the case.
Yeah, totally. What about one more? You could pick out one more to close us out if you want.
All right. The definition of a podcast doesn't really matter.
No, the big one.
Agree or disagree?
I disagree with this. And it's not because I'm a bitter old man, even though I am. It's not just because of that. So that there is an argument that a podcast should simply be what people think podcasts are, and there's no point in trying to change their mind because that's what they think, and just run with it and just do your thing. And I've heard decent arguments, backing that up. I still don't agree with it. I think it puts podcasting in danger of becoming a medium that is potentially owned by a YouTube or a Spotify. And I don't think that would be good for anyone apart from the people who run YouTube or Spotify. So I'm a big proponent of open podcasting and all its powers that it brings to us, or empowers us as creators, as indie creators. I wouldn't like that to be under threat. And I think by just letting anything go, this What was it? Did you not send me a video the other day, Jacob? And it was Time Team. It was just it looked to me like a Time Team, which is a UK TV show, just an episode. And I think they said, "Welcome to the Time Team podcast," and you're like, "But that's just an episode from the television." So yeah, I think it seems harmless, and it's kind of not, because the blurrier it gets, the more risk it'll just be hoovered up and walled off, and we'll have lost this great medium. So yeah, that's my thoughts. What's yours?
Yeah, similar. I think that we're in danger of podcasting becoming taking on the meaning of a shitty TV program. I think that's actually where the direction of travel is right now. And that I sent you that Time Team example because that's exactly what that was. It was just the shitty version of their highly produced TV program. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was Time Team, but with a handheld camera. And that's quite sad in a way, because it really didn't hold on to a lot of the trappings of what made a podcast so captivating for me when I started listening to podcasts. And but then it's, I don't know, it is strange because, I mean, podcasting clearly evolved from radio. As much as I don't like it, like, is it inevitable that it evolves into something else, I guess? Maybe that's by the by. I think the definition of a podcast does matter. Because otherwise we are going to lose this thing that's perfectly good right now. And what's to say that we can't have a different thing that is just a shittier TV program? Why does it need to be a podcast? Why do we need to take that name and by taking the name lose the meaning? And I agree on the point of the platforms. Like, honestly, I think that the only thing that can save us is Apple, really. The direction of travel right now is concerning for free and open podcasting, and I think the only thing that can really save us is Apple, and I think they're taking steps in the right direction. I think I said this a few episodes ago, but I had a chance to speak to some people on the podcast team, and the one thing that I told them was, you need to find a way to make video a first-class citizen in open podcasting standards. Otherwise, all of our jobs are going to look quite different in like 5 years. You know, we're not going to have what we have now. Podcasting is going to be different. Your platform is going to be different, and our jobs as podcasters are going to be different. I think the only way to stop the slide into, podcasting just becoming a shitty TV program. And when I say shitty TV program, I just mean like the same idea, that the same sort of thing that you can achieve with a TV program, just with lower production standards. Therefore, it's an open thing that anyone can do. I don't think that in of itself is a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. I think that's one of the good things about the internet, that people can, with a smaller budget, create something that's actually just as entertaining, and put that online and earn a living from it. I think that's a good thing, but I don't think that we should wipe out another category to do it. It can be its own thing. But at the same time, it's like we're arguing about semantics too. We're arguing about the use of a name. But the name means a lot. The meaning of it means a lot. And if we lose the name and we lose the meaning, and sort of, what if the definition of podcasting does change, then we lose what it is just now. It's as simple as that. It's just it's like an evolution thing, right? We'll just, give it a few sort of cycles of the internet, and it'll just mean something completely different. Like, what does a forum mean now compared to 20 years ago? You say forum now, and it usually means like a live open Discord channel where it's just kind of flowing chat. There's no organized threads. The definition of what a forum is, like, the gap is sort of filled by something that is completely different to what it was back then. And what it was back then had its own virtues, and it had, a reason to exist, and it was a useful thing in its own way. And we've kind of lost what that is now, because the same description has been taken over by something that's kind of materially quite different. I think the definition does matter. I think that the current direction of travel is quite concerning, and like, unless something changes, we probably are going to lose this current definition. And I think that the only player that can really save us is Apple, because they have the resources and they have the pool. And I think they need to continue down the direction that they're going right now with HLS video. But I think they need to go further. I think they need to work with the podcast industry, podcast community, on evolving the standards that we have, on evolving RSS, and somehow building in a better system that is still open and free for discoverability. Because that's really the only argument for the platforms. Yeah.
You kind of touched on something there that puts another dimension or angle to this. You're referencing like TV show style shows. And I guess, we're coming at this definition of a podcast from the pure nuts and bolts delivery aspect, the technical delivery of a podcast. But there's also the perception of what is a podcast from a format point of view. And I know that more and more people naturally, more and more new people to podcasting simply see a podcast as two celebrities, like a chat show, two people chatting. That's a podcast. And I was reading a really good piece this morning via the Sounds Profitable newsletter about, if we go back to the serial boom in podcasting, I think Serial maybe came out about 2014 or so. And for the next 4 or 5 years after, because it's a paradigm-changing show, when it kind of demonstrated what was possible with these really narrative, highly produced, serialized audio podcasts. And it created this, for like I say, 4, 5, 6 years, big production houses really invested in this style of show. And a lot of people who were good journalists, good storytellers, good audio producers were getting good work out of it because they were working on these shows, they were putting them out. And really, a lot of these shows were massive hits, not just Serial, but the podcasts that came after them. And the landscape naturally changed when video became the topic of the day. And suddenly these production houses think, looking at how much it's going to cost to create a new Serial versus I could just get, this guy who used to be on the TV, there's a few celebrities, we'll get them on a sofa together, they'll just have a chat, and it's super, super cheap to create a show like that. You've got all these short clips that span from it, you could get it out on all the socials, it's economically almost a no-brainer for these production houses who ultimately want to make money, naturally. So I think I heard Tom Webster, again, It Sounds Profitable, last year talking about the risk of a creative monoculture, I think he called it, in podcasting, that it becomes the assumption that a podcast is just a chat show, probably famous people. So there's that too. There's that whole other angle to it that, it's a bad thing if that's all people think podcasts are, because then we lose the opportunity to have these other great shows that are proven to work. Highly narrative, serialized content is just one example of that. You've got audio drama. You've just got the myriad of ways that you could make great audio content, make great spoken word content. So there's that too. There's that whole side of it as well that I think is important.
Yeah. So we
thank you for my TED talk.
I agree. So we lose the sort of, is what you're saying? Part of the risk is that we lose the diversity of what a podcast is.
Yeah.
And the different formats that we have, and the sort of freedom that creates for people, sort of creative freedom of it.
Yeah. New people entering in, I think, well, who are the first 8 celebrities I'll interview? They maybe don't even consider the fact that, well, you could do this other thing, this thing you're really interested in. Here's a story, here's a journey you could take the listener on, and it's just you and your Zoom recorder and some music and ambience. I'd love to see more of that in podcasts. I think at the moment it's not that it's not out there, it's just not in vogue. It's not getting the ears or the promotion it should be, the hype it should be getting. So
yeah, it does exist. It's just, I think discoverability is part of the problem. Surfacing these, I think there's no shortage of people starting podcasts. Probably, the sort of makeup of of the format has probably changed a bit. I do think there's no real shortage of it. It's just far easier to find that sort of creator on YouTube than it is on a podcast app. It is way easier to have them surface to you. Do you know what I mean? There is no, yeah, I don't know. We need, I know some podcast listening apps do try and do that, but yeah, it's not enough. You know, there needs to be a better standard for that. Because otherwise, I find myself when I'm looking for some sort of niche content, I go and search my podcast listening app for that. I'm sifting through quite a lot of dross. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing to tell me what's good and what's not. There's no signal in there. It's a lot of noise. But if I go to YouTube, I can get that signal. And I would rather be listening to it than watching it. Do you know what I mean? It's something that I want to immerse myself in. Like, that's what I love podcasts for. It's immersion. Do you know what I mean? I can go about my day and still feed this interest, feed this want for knowledge or for entertainment of a certain kind or whatever it is, you know. But the only place I can typically find it is YouTube. You know, and it's not because it doesn't exist as a podcast. It does. It's out there. But yeah, that's the challenge.
Well, I guess that's a good place to leave it. We've got through a fair few this week, and we got really deep at times. Had a go at these youngsters, these people holding their microphones as well. So sitting on our park bench with tweed bonnets on. Well, you're not. You're Gen Z, so you're on a, what would you be on a skateboard doing a TikTok whilst I don't know, happy slapping someone? Is that a Gen Z thing?
Yeah,
probably not. You could happy slap me.
Skiddly do up.
Cool. Well, thanks as always, Jacob. It's been really good fun to chat, and of course, I'll just give a wee shout out for Alitu as well. Please do consider it for all your podcast edit needs. It's we like to think that the best place to edit your podcast on the whole internet, which is a nice accolade that we've personally assigned to it. So I would encourage you to give it a wee free trial, which you could do free for 7 days at alitu.com, alitu.com. Did you not say last week there was a wee coupon code for the Noble podcast, Podcraft listener as well?
Yeah, and you can use coupon code Podcraft and get 50% off your first month.
Do it. All right. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Jacob. And I look forward to getting together again next week.
Thank you. Goodbye.